What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of the Sovereign Mindset Podcast. My name is Mike Ruiz, and today I'm talking to Jay. You can find him on Twitter at Reclaimed Mind. And Jay's a good dude, man. He's been pushing out a lot of quality content, so give him a follow. And today we get into a discussion about all types of stuff. We talk about Australia during COVID, what that was like, and how just the craziness of it all has really pushed him to tap into his sovereignty. We talk about his experience with psychedelics, in particular ayahuasca. Then we get into his views on masculinity, and we talk a little bit about the archetypes. So, with that said, I hope you guys enjoy. We're going to get right into it. All right, Jay, welcome to the podcast, man. It's great to have you on. I guess the way we'll start this off, if you want to give a little background on who you are and what you're about, just so our viewers get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, cool, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, man. My name's Jay. I'm English, as you can probably tell from my accent. I'm currently living in Australia. We've been living here with my wife and three kids for the last 8 years now. So originally, I'm from the West Midlands in England, near a place called Birmingham. Peaky Blinders is the easy reference point that most people seem to is the only thing that people really know. So it's a Peaky Blinders and Black Sabbath territory where I'm from originally. So I started on Twitter just about a year ago, I think, writing about personal development, masculinity, a little bit about psychedelics and stuff as well, my experience with ayahuasca. And really what's sort of fueled that journey is just my lifelong interest in personal development, spirituality, politics, and my background is I studied sociology and psychology at university in Liverpool. I moved into marketing, sales and marketing, but I've always maintained that interest in personal development and understanding the human mind and the sort of social dynamics as well. So it's kind of a nice logical step for me to eventually come across Twitter and find an outlet for me to sort of start connecting with people and to start writing. So that's been a great journey. I've also studied psychotherapy and did some voluntary work with people who were suicidal in London for a few years. So I've kind of done lots of different things, but it's all kind of ties together within that kind of personal development space. Really, it's been a real big interest of mine for such a long time.
Cool. So, how did you get to Australia from England?
That's a So the short version of the story is that I went backpacking for 2 years, back in a long time ago, 20 years ago. That was it. I went 20 years ago, 21 years ago, I think it was. I came to Australia as part of that for a year, and I actually met my wife then when I was backpacking.
Mm-hmm.
She was studying in Australia, and I was backpacking through. And we met quite early on when I arrived, and so I had to leave the country. We moved to London together. Lived in London for sort of 8 years, and then eventually got us permanent residency to move to Australia, which took like years and years to come through. So anyway, long story. We ended up finally found ourselves in Australia. We had one of our children was born in London, and then the other two little ones, my daughter and my middle son, were born in Australia.
Nice. And how is Australia? I've never been over there. The only impression I have of it is kind of the media and what's been going on now in the news. But what are your thoughts on Australia? Is it a country that you like, especially compared to England?
Yeah, man, it's a beautiful country. The where to start? That's a big question, really, given everything that's gone on since 2020.
Yeah, well, you know what? Why don't we go right into that? How was life like in Australia during COVID? Because I'm here in Florida, freedom country. seeing what's going on over there, man, from the policies to the supposed concentration camps that they're building over there. What was it like over there during COVID?
Yeah, man, it was crazy. Yeah, I'm very envious of you in Florida for sure. Yeah, so I live in Victoria, which was the worst possible state to live in, and I would say that it COVID definitely changed my perspective on Australia and surprised me as to the the government. So you've got like state and federal government here. So the federal government were useless, pretty much. But so it was all dealt with on a state level. So each state dealt with had slightly different responses. Although generally it was pretty harsh. But Victoria, where I am, was the worst. And the premier here is Dan Andrews. Unfortunately, he just got back into power, which blows my mind. Um, yeah. So what surprised me about COVID was the response for one, and also the general compliance from people. There was a small bit of resistance, but largely people have been incredibly compliant and seemingly trusting of the government, um, which has surprised me a lot actually and disappointed me. Um, so yes, they've built camps. There are camps in Victoria that are now sitting empty, but I'm sure they will be fired up again for a good opportunity. They've got camps around the country. Um,
So then it's accurate, right? There are like camps. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. They spend a lot of money building those facilities and trying to make them seem like holiday parks, but they weren't holiday parks at all.
Wow. And yeah, like, when a government puts like a policy in place and builds out permanent structures like that, they're probably going to want to get use out of them. So it's pretty like who knows what's down the pipeline. That's pretty
Yeah,
scary.
yeah, man. It was a very strange time. So we had vaccine mandates. So we had back to back lockdowns for a handful of cases. There were like, I think there were like less than 10 cases. This isn't even anything in particular, 10 cases in the state, and they locked the entire state down to try and keep it to zero COVID. So Victoria, we had back to back lockdowns for like 2 years. Like it was just wild. Like you'd literally open up for like a month, 6 weeks, and then they'd lock down again. Um,
And why
and
did
we
why do
had
you think the people are so compliant? Why did they comply? I mean, you think like so you think places like Canada, um, New Zealand, Australia, these are supposedly Western liberal democracies that pride themselves on these principles of of individualism, of liberty, freedom, and democracy. And it's crazy to me to watch how easily these Western countries folded in on their government and were so trusting and compliant. Do you have any idea what happened over there? Like why the people were so compliant?
um, yeah, I think there's a couple of things. There's people are you've got a nanny state here. The government are in everyone's business all the time, and people seem to be accepting of that fact and quite happy about that. So it's a big nanny state. Victoria, in particular, is Labour. It's very left leaning and quite progressive. Um, so, particularly in Victoria, the large number of people just support the Labour government, and if that's what Labour government are going to go for, centralisation and more controls, then people seem to be, yeah, it's all ideologically based. Yeah, we'll go for that because that's what we're all about. And I also think that you've got 30 years of economic growth here. So I think personally, I think that we've had such a long period of economic growth here. It's a land of milk and honey. People are like the sort of general attitude is kind of, which I absolutely detest, is she'll be right. It's that kind of labor. Oh, she'll be right. It's okay, whatever.
Oh,
And then
gotcha.
just kind of, do you get me? So it's like,
Yeah.
I fucking detest this kind of
Like it's no
attitude.
big deal.
Yeah, it's no big deal.
It'll work
She'll be
itself
right.
out.
She'll be right. And you're like,
Yeah.
and they're kind of just like, because I think because you've got such a long period of economic growth where, you've got a generation uh, coming up for two generations really who uh, have just had good times and people are making money and the economy's okay. So, it's okay. Trust the government, just I'll do my thing. And I think that's played a lot into it. There doesn't seem to be that kind of tension or friction there that maybe you would have had in other countries where you've gone through a few cycles and ups and downs and stuff. Um, so yeah, I'd say those couple of things. It's a bit it's I think Australia, like the 20 years that when I first came here and 20 years later, um, has changed a lot. And then you've got a more sort of, I think the old Australia, and this is just as an outsider's perspective, and I may have this completely wrong, but like if you want to see the real Australia, you have to get out into the countryside. Now, thankfully, I do live in the countryside, um, but the most populous area is only 25 million people in the entire country, which is it's a massive place. So but most of the population is concentrated around obviously the big cities like Melbourne and Sydney. But if you want to meet real Australians, you've got to get out, or like old school Australians, you've got to get out into the country. Particularly the further you go out into the bush, the more you'll meet the more rugged individuals, because obviously Australia was cut off largely from a lot of the world. Just the distance meant that people had to amend and make do with what they had, and very industrious and hardworking, and the conditions here are quite unforgiving. Um, and I think that's changed as it's become more of a cosmopolitan, metropolitan kind of place. And that's kind of changed the politics and changed people's attitudes as well over the last kind of 30 years as more people move into the cities. I think it's changing the culture. Um, so yeah, but I mean, it's been disappointing for me to see. Okay, we moved out here thinking this would be, oh, it's offering all these opportunities for us and my children, and then to see that actually did we make a massive mistake here, um, and do we need to leave? Because the vaccine mandate meant that you had to be vaccinated to go to work, like full stop. If you were in any kind of uh, unless you were working at home, and thankfully I was working at home. If you were out anywhere, you needed to be vaccinated. They said that you had a choice whether you were vaccinated or not, but clearly you have no choice if you
Can't
have
live.
to be vaccinated to go to work. You can't live.
Yeah.
So, and I've got uh, a good friend of mine who works in a hospital. He had two jabs, developed a heart condition through the jab, and then couldn't get an exemption to get a booster shot. And they insisted that it doesn't matter if you've got this heart condition, you need to get another booster. You need to get your booster. So he's had to leave the state to get away from the mandate, because anyone who works for the government here, in healthcare or government services, still has to be uh, boosted
Wow.
up to the eyeballs. So, and I met, I know other people who've got vaccine injuries, and still their workplaces demand that they keep getting the booster shots because it's mandated. And now what the government have done in there is they've passed the kind of responsibility across to businesses, and so they don't mandate it anymore, but they're kind of encouraging businesses to push the vaccine um,
So
onto the workers.
is there a vaccine passport right now for
Not now. There
okay.
was like I'm not vaccinated, thank God, and neither's my wife or children. We actually pulled my eldest son from school, so he's homeschooled now, because well, one, the education, we realised from, because we were in lockdowns for such a long time, my son was being homeschooled effectively anyway, and we realised he was actually learning more at home than he was at school, but also because they're pushing the vaccine so hard on the kids. Um, so, but yeah, we couldn't actually go many places. We were literally locked out of society. So Dan Andrews talked about the um, like in a lot of countries, it was the vaccinated economy. He talked about if you were unvaccinated, you were locked out of the economy. Um, we couldn't go. We could use a supermarket, but we couldn't go to any other shops. Um, you couldn't go anywhere
Wow.
if you didn't have your vaccine passport.
And has that stuck in the culture now? Like, is there a stigma against being unvaccinated in the general population? I mean, I know the government is going to do what the government does, but as far as the people, do they look down upon those that aren't vaccinated? Are they hostile towards people like yourself and your family?
Um,
Have
you
you
know what?
experienced anything like that?
So there was a period of time because I was working remotely anyway, so I didn't receive any particular heat, but the conversations that were being had in a lot of meetings were very aggressive towards unvaccinated people, and but generally, like I live in the countryside, like I don't watch the mainstream media, I don't watch the TV at all, really. Um, so I've got no idea. I never watch mainstream Australian TV because it's the fucking pits. So um, I mean, generally, like I kind of keep it to myself, really. So I try not to get into those conversations because I don't see it being particularly fruitful because I know that you're just going to get into an argument. So, but there was definitely a lot of derision of people who were unvaccinated, and I definitely had lots of negative stuff. But thankfully, where I'm living, I'm kind of isolated. And what's happened for us is that, like, we actually, I mean, look, COVID for me and my family's actually been pretty good because, sorry, I've got a fly. We we sold our house. We moved further out into the countryside. We bought a plot of land. We've just moved into our new build house, which is um, more sustainable. We've got a bit more land. We've got our chickens. We've got bees. We've got growing vegetables. So it's actually pushed us to be like I already thought very differently anyway. My politics are more libertarian and always have been, but it definitely woke me up to the fact of the government can just turn around. I mean, they still can now. The government can just turn around at any point and say, you're going to do what we tell you to do. And no matter how liberal you think your government is, the fact that the government is there, they will fucking do whatever. They've got the monopoly on violence. They can turn around at any point and demand that you do stuff. But we were like, right, okay, let's try and set ourselves up so we're slightly more self-sufficient,
Yep.
and and we started networking a lot more with homeschool families and other people of a like mind. We had friends who wouldn't speak to us. We've definitely lost friends in the process, and it's impacted on the kids more because they were like friends of my children, and we got uninvited to children's parties because we weren't vaccinated. We're the dirty, unvaccinated people. Um,
It's
but
crazy, man.
yeah,
It's
we've
it's
built a better network from it anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So this is one of the things that I noticed about COVID because it happened to me as well. It pushes us to do, to finally make these moves to become more so self-sufficient or to become more self-actualized. For myself, what I noticed was I'm libertarian minded as well, right? I have my philosophical center. And part of that rests in like the individual's right to life and liberty. And
Mm.
when I saw what was happening, and I saw just in my community how many people were going along with the program and just throwing their freedoms away and swallowing the government narrative hook, line, and sinker, and then just regurgitating out
Mm.
verbatim the propaganda talking points. I was like, whoa, what is happening? It really took me by storm. And I tried to, I tried to talk sense into people. Um, and I tried to lead, and I realized, man, there's a lot of things about me that are lacking, right? For a long
Mm.
time, I've been complacent. And because like you said, it was boom times. things, life is good. There's no general worries that you need to have. Society kind of takes care of its own. You got food and money is flowing. Things are good. So there's no necessity to level up. There's no need to get out your comfort zone. But then when COVID hit, I was like, okay, wow, there's some things that are inadequate about me, especially if I'm going to try to build a life outside of the system that they're trying to contrive. I need to make the necessary changes within myself and my surroundings, and that included stuff like leveling up, uh, like my masculine characteristics, include stuff like building a network, becoming more self-sufficient. So I could relate to what you're saying, where it was like, okay, you kind of were forced to do things there that are actually beneficial for you in the long run because it creates a certain level of sovereignty.
Yes, 100%. I think like it's definitely made me level up as a man and and made me more conscious of my role as a protector and a provider for my family. And it was interesting actually. I went back, so as I mentioned at the start, I've sort of had I've got like a 15-year experience with ayahuasca, the psychedelic plant medicine. I'd actually taken a break for like would have been 3 years because when my daughter was born. Um, so I took a break, and then in between the lockdowns, I had opportunity to attend ceremony a few times, and that was incredibly helpful for me to attend the ceremony again and to because it helped the medicine. I wrote a few threads about this on Twitter. Like the medicine was helped me gain perspective about what I needed to do and who I needed to become. It was like that next version of the evolution. And there was a spiritual dimension to it, and there was a practical dimension to it too. And that was incredibly helpful to me when you don't know what's happening. Like you've been locked down, you can't go places, and it's like, what do we do now? Do we leave? What do we do? And then to go back and do attend a series of ayahuasca ceremonies was really pivotal for me in terms of okay, right, we're going to build this house, we're going to homeschool our kids. Um, we, I need to make sure I've got to make sure my health's on point. I've got to make sure. The big thing for me was like I was my wife and I were fearful about the future for our children,
Yep.
um, and the ceremonies, one ceremony in particular, helped me realize that I can't protect. I would, as much as I would like to physically protect my children for the entire life, that's not feasible or possible or even healthy to do. Um, but so my role is to ensure that I instill in my children the right mindset, the right attitude, the right towards health and their physical well-being and mental health skills, and that I instill these things in them so they're strong enough to weather whatever storm happens. And that was a really big thing for me. That like as much as I would like to push the bad people away, I realized that I can't do that for my entire life. I have to, as a father and as a man, I have to really step up and um, be a be a teacher and a guide, and also be a model for them because they're going to go out into this world that we don't know which way it's going to go with if the World Economic Forum get their way and stakeholder capitalism and all this kind of bullshit. That I need to foster. I just need to be the best man possible for my children. That when I'm gone, that they carry that with them through their lives and whatever storms we're going to face.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had my first ayahuasca experience during COVID hysteria, and it was in a very similar fashion looking for clarity as to what was going on because there were some major, I would say, societal and also spiritual shifts happening, right?
Yeah.
And I felt it, but I couldn't make sense of it because I had no aspect or no appreciation or understanding of the spiritual world. And
Mm.
one of the things that happened during my ayahuasca, it was during January 2021, was yeah, just a similar realization that you had. I had a similar fear about, the, let's call it the, you know, I don't know if you want to call it the ruling class, but basically the orchestrators, the people who hold the leverages of power right now, and are able to create, these worldwide events that affect us in very profound ways and shift the course of humanity. um and I was just like, wow, how is it that they have this much power, and you kind of feel hopeless, especially when everyone around you is going along with the narrative. It's like, the herd just made a right turn towards the cliff, and you're
Yeah,
there like, what's going on here, guys? Like, how did this happen? And so, yeah, I was seeking answers. um you know Joined men's groups, joined different groups, tried to have discussions, reached out to people, networked, tried to gain clarity. And it got to the point where I was like, look, man, I'm ready to try anything. So I did my first ayahuasca experience. And yeah, one of the things that I realized there, man, I mean, I could talk about it for hours, right? Like the amount of revelations that occur during something like that is just unfathomable. And it changed me. It changed me on on so many levels, spiritually. Like, I don't know if physiologically if it changed me, but like if there's some neurological pathways that opened up after that,
yeah, yeah,
you know stuff like that. But it there was definitely a release. Uh, uh, my anxiety wasn't as intense after that, right? And
yeah,
it's been a gradual process of trying to integrate what I experienced that night into my reality. But one of the results has been just this release of anxiety, and realizing that, hey, we don't have it all under our control, and that's okay. But but you still have a duty, a purpose, and there is meaning that you need to carry out in your life. And the rest was more of a sense that I just left it up to God. Like, it was during my ayahuasca experience that, it was an immediate realization that there is another, I guess you could call it, dimension, or another layer to this world. Like, I went from being a practical Christian, just from listening to Jordan Peterson and understanding that
mm,
Christianity provides us a framework and provides a
mm,
structure, and it's a moral guideline. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess I'll be a Christian,
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
and then my ayahuasca experience was just an immediate realization, like, oh no, this is much deeper than just the practical material world. There's like layers to reality here. And ever since then, it's deepened my faith in God and allowed me to release a lot of that stress and worry to Him, if that makes sense.
yeah, 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 yeah. No, mate, I completely hear I think it's like I had. So I first did ayahuasca like 15 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it was that first time was transformative. I've obviously done it. I've attended maybe 20 ceremonies or 20 summit ceremonies since then. Not
Mm-hmm.
loads, but enough. But
Mm-hmm.
that first one was huge for me. Um, and I was always interested in spirituality, but in kind of like practical, kind of agnostic terms. Like, it was interesting to me in a sociological perspective, since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I was practicing meditation, having traveled through Southeast Asia, Nepal, Thailand, etc., and come in contact with lots of Buddhist temples and whatnot. So I was interested in meditation. I was meditating, but then it wasn't till I drank the medicine that I was like, whoa, like, this is real, man. There's a spiritual dimension to the world, um, that you can't even begin to fathom. And when you listen to it from the outside, you'd be like, shut the fuck up. Like, you're doing drugs or whatever. Like, of course you're going to hallucinate. But I've done acid, I've done all types of stuff. But there's something about DMT and ayahuasca. I've smoked DMT a few times, and drunk ayahuasca more. But when you come in contact with this other dimension, and these beings, and this, it like completely changed my perspective. It changed me as a person on many different ways. It removed this wall that I'd built around myself, that I didn't even know was there, and that was suffocating me, and it just removed it all,
Was
and gave
it,
me this.
would you say that wall was built kind of from your conditioning programming of the material world or from society in general?
I think at the time, I think it was a lot of. I think it was so at the time I was struggling with depression, and addiction, and it didn't cure it all straight away, but I think there was a lot of variables that came together to build this wall up. There was my own temperament as a child, and then personal experiences through life, both as a child and then growing up, um, that meant that I'd built up a wall as a protective shield, um, but without, subconsciously, without realizing I was doing it. And then over time, that wall was suffocating me. And I still distinctly remember today, like, I did two ceremonies as part of that first retreat, um, and the first night in particular, like, it was scary as hell, and I did a lot of crying, and there was a lot of like release of stuff, as well as seeing all these impossible things. Like the one thing in particular that still stands out to mind was just, I've never had an experience like this since. So I'm lying there with my eyes closed, and I'm seeing all these like patterns and shapes and all this kind of impossible stuff. My experience with ayahuasca was always incredibly visual, very very strong, overwhelmingly so at times. So I'm lying there and I'm seeing all this stuff, and then almost like it was a curtain. This The curtain parted. Literally, this is what I saw. This is wild. I still remember this today. The curtain parted, and then this indigenous fella came out, and he was uh, naked, apart from something covering his genitals, and he had a big staff, right? And he got uh, moss growing through his beard and his hair. So up until this point, I'm seeing all this like colourful, psychedelic stuff, and then this guy parts the curtain, comes through and looks at me up and down, and then turns back around behind him and says to whoever's behind him telepathically, and I hear him telepathically, he says, "He's not ready yet." And he takes another look at me, and then closes the curtain. And I was like, whoa. And I'll never forget.
Holy
I've never
cow.
had another experience. I've had a similar experience, in terms of nature and this indigenous recent last year, but like that was wild, man. Like,
Yeah, I mean, listen, that sounds crazy, but I believe it. And yeah, just from experiencing it that one time. And I kind of want to get into that right now. Like, do you think there's a danger there to psychedelics? Do you think that um especially in the case of ayahuasca, do you think that it's something that's beneficial for everyone, or do you think that you got to be careful?
I I think that, look, I think it's beneficial if you are called to do it, and I do think it calls you, like, and it's not something to be taken lightly, obviously. But I think if you're called to do it and you've got an interest in it, and you have things in your life that you want to work with or address, then yes, I think it's beneficial. The risks are, obviously, there's normally checks and stuff that you're not on, particularly like antidepressant medication and different medications that can make it particularly physically unsafe. Um, but I think if you're of generally sound mind, then like it helped me, um, quit drinking drugs. Now that this took time, and it helped with my depression as well, for sure. But again, this took time. It wasn't like, I think some people think that ayahuasca is like a magic bullet, and you're going to go to a few ceremonies and then it's going to just cure all your problems. It doesn't. Ayahuasca creates space and provides insight for you to then go away and do the work, but you still have to do the work afterwards. I've met people who go to multiple ceremonies, all the time, and it becomes like a hobby in a
Yeah.
way. It becomes their practice, and I don't think that's healthy. Um, and I think it's more cope. It's like I've been over a very long period of time, and I've only been when I've needed to go. Um, but so the danger is more like you can use it as a crutch to go back to, because within a short space of time, my experience has always been you create a very beautiful community of people. Everyone's very raw, very honest. Um, they're very powerful retreats that I go on, and people are drawn to that as much as the medicine because it creates this sacred space that I don't think people experience. You don't experience anywhere else. So I think the danger is actually depending on your accessibility to the medicine and ceremony. But I think that's the real danger, that you could get pulled into the desire for the community and just being part of something. Obviously, had a conversation with Ben Greenfield. I think it was last year. Yeah, last year we did a Spaces on Twitter, and we talked about the sort of the spiritual dimension of it, and could it be that you're opening yourself up to, if you accept the fact that there is a spiritual dimension, and
Mm-hmm.
we are in a I personally believe that we are in a spiritual warfare, cosmic spiritual warfare, um, and that could you be opening yourself up to spirits that may seem benevolent but aren't, um, which could well be possible. So could there be a spiritual risk to it as well? Then yes, I think there probably could be. But then at the same time, if we live in the spiritual dimension, these risks are ever present to our society through drink and drugs and pornography, and like if there's a malevolent force within the world, it is through everything as much as that. So anyway, it's a long way to say, you know, there could be potential risks. I've only really had benefits from it because it's been so important for my personal journey. Um, but I think if you go and do it, you get insights, you get space, you get clarity. Then the onus is on you then to do the work, because it's not going to cure all your problems. I think people go there thinking it's going to cure all their problems and heal everything, and I just don't think it's the case.
Dude, we should do an ayahuasca podcast one day and just go heavy and deep into it because I got a lot of stuff that I want to share as well. I've never really had that I've never really explained my journey and kind of my insights and my revelations, so I would like to do that one day.
I'd love to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But since we're here and we're talking about personal development and stuff like that, I want to get a little bit into kind of the content that you're doing right now and the work that you're doing, as far as relating to personal development and masculine development. Yeah, just in general, you want to talk about that direction that you're headed in over there?
Yeah, cool, man. Yeah. Well, it all ties in actually because it was interesting that, like I said, I was struggling with. So, like, I started smoking weed when I was 14, and then started taking speed, like amphetamines, when I was 16, I think, 16,
Mm-hmm.
17, and then ecstasy after that. I didn't really actually start drinking till I was 16 when I started drinking, but I didn't drink much. So, but growing up for me, where I grew up, drink and drugs were just a normal part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Not from my parent, not from my family, but just like, with friends and peers. You get in the pub, and there'd be like two or three generations of people. Everyone's off their head, either pissed out their head or high and pissed. So it kind of I grew up around that and clubbing and big in the club scene and stuff, taking lots of ecstasy. So, but that was great up until a point, and I think that was I was using it as a crutch to give me confidence and to make me feel better, and then eventually it became a very dark thing for me. Um, so through that years, I don't drink, anymore. I don't take drugs. I've like completely sort of just celebrated 1 year sober. So I had 4 years where I stopped drinking. I was sober for 4 years. I actually started drinking again 2020 because it was like you're sitting around a bit more. Oh, let's have a drink. Thankfully, it wasn't as bad as what it used to be, where I'd be like blackout. Like I've ended up in so many, like chipped a bone in my nose, cut my head open, like doing all types of fucking, put myself in so many dangerous situations, but a completely blackout. Like in the middle of London, I'd just black out, and then I'd come to, and I'd be in some random flat in Brixton, drinking rum and snorting lines of coke with a load of Jamaican dudes, which was, they were great, thankfully. But like, I was like, how the fuck did I get here? Like, I'm just literally got a glass of rum. I'm like teleporter. Like, it's just fucking stupid stuff. So no, so he talks about the personal development stuff. So really, I think I came through all this stuff and had this experience, and I'm interested in psychology and masculinity. And I think over the time, then it was like, I had kids, and that was a real big transformative experience for me as well. And then there were a few different books that I read. Was like gave me some insights into myself, particularly Jack Donovan's book, The Way of Men. Like when I read that book, maybe about 8 years ago, we just moved to Australia. That was like, whoa, that blew my mind. That book, his series of books have just been huge for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's like looking back, I think particularly when I turned 40, I look back on like my whole journey of going through drink, drugs, depression to the verge of suicide a couple of times. Like it got really dark, really, really dark. And I look back on it all and I was like, I want to help. I want to help men, and I want to help young men especially not have to make all those same fucking stupid mistakes that I did, and that like I had to figure it out on my own over all that 20 years, let's say. I had to figure all that out through lots of trial and error, and I didn't have any guidance. And this is the big thing as well. There's like very few, particularly growing up, there were no real centered masculine role models for me, and so you kind of just left adrift to whatever's going on around you. And so it's been a big thing for me to be like, I want to help other men now to get away from that low value escapism and that addiction and that kind of that negative pull, that negative gravitational pull that seems to be around, and inspire some change in people's lives. And particularly for the young guys, I think it's great now. Like, obviously I grew up, which makes me sound incredibly old, but I grew up without the internet, which is wild to think now. But it's the internet's an incredible blessing and a curse at the same time. And I think the blessing is that now young men and men in general around the world have got an opportunity to find their tribe, to network with other men, to learn and develop and grow. And I think that's particularly over the last like 5-6 years, that's been great to see. And like, we're having this conversation now, like we wouldn't have met if it wasn't for being on Twitter. Whereas, when I was a kid, like if it wasn't on TV or if someone didn't pass you a book, you wouldn't know anything. You only knew what was in your immediate vicinity. So it's using that opportunity to power the internet now to connect with like-minded people and to be able to provide some kind of guidance and support, I guess.
Yeah. So, man, I relate to so much of what you're saying, and I agree with so much of it. It's a very similar process that I've had and realization that I've had. You know, getting to my late 30s, and dealing with little stressors in my life. Like my wife and we traveled to 16 countries in 6 months. And when you travel like that, especially with someone else, and not only that, I didn't do any planning beforehand. I just figured, oh, we'll just wing it and we'll figure it out as we go. But man, that adds another layer of stress to the travel itself, because you're having to figure out the logistics on the go, on the fly, in different places all around the world. So anyways, during that trip, I realized, man, there's a lot of immature aspects about my personality, and there's like I can't handle pressure correctly. I'm emotionally immature,
Yeah.
and I need to work on some stuff. So, and it was in Thailand. I was there. You're supposed to be in paradise, right? It's you're surrounded by like these limestone cliffs and beautiful
Mm.
beaches, and that was like my low point where I was like, I was like, I felt like completely lost. And my girlfriend and I, we had just like split up, and we decided to take a break from each other. She went off to yoga school, and I just stayed behind, and I was just by myself. And anyways, I just realized, man, I got work to do. Like I'm not as put together as I think I am. And that's what really put me on the path towards like personal development. I remember reading like Scott Adams' book, like How to Win or How to Fail at Everything and Still Win Bigly or something like that. And that was like just put some things into concept for me and got me started on my path, got into stoicism. Um, and I was kind of like just putting along like with it, reading here, reading there, trying to work on things here and there, but not really putting any serious effort towards it
Mm.
until 2020. And again, when I said like I realized again just how inadequate I was, even though I thought that I was like on my way to personal development and improving certain aspects of my personality and maturing. It wasn't I just wasn't where I wanted to be yet. And I utilized the tools that we have available to us, like you mentioned, like the internet, and we got access to like, all types of books and courses and stuff that where if you want to put forth the effort, you can really transform yourself in a short amount of time. Like
Yeah.
the material is there, the people are there, the access is there. And so, yeah, I think that for a lot of people right now, they're realizing that their personality has been shaped in a way where it's kind of malinformed, right? Malformed. It's not, you know, a lot of us, including myself, a lot of men, right? We're growing up in this feminized society where we're giving all types of contradictory advice and
Yeah.
direction from um from a world that doesn't appreciate the needs and the mindset of a man, and we're pretty much discarded our concerns and our needs and our path is discarded. And now I think that there's a definite realization that okay, we've been misled, and now it's time to find that path again and to develop out those aspects of our personality that will help us become a more fulfilled man. And I feel like
Yeah.
part of that is in a way like rediscovering like myths, right?
Mm.
And rediscovering the archetypes. And I know you've been writing some stuff on that. Like I think it's a good way for us to look at a model, at a structure of what qualities a good man has, and you can then use that to kind of develop that out within yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think, yeah, I definitely resonate with all of that. It's, yeah, the one, yeah, the big thing for me was interested, like I said, I actually reject for a long time. I think I rejected masculinity because um, I only had experiences of largely what you would quote unquote toxic masculinity or like imbalanced masculinity. So it was either like you were like a macho guy or a bit of a fucking idiot, to be honest. You'd be like, you know, drinking and fighting, and that'd be about it. But you're not well put together in any way. It's a very one-dimensional aspect of what a man looks like. And I actually rejected that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And intellectually made myself feel superior because I'm not like that. And because society was very much pushing a more feminized man, I was like, well, I'm a modern man. Like this is what I do. Like, and like you embrace that because that seems to be the right thing. But actually, but I think that all of that stuff was, and generally all of this stuff fuels the men's mental health crisis that we see. Men's like depression and the suicide rates are just awful. Um, and I think a lot of that is because men are made to feel evil and bad, and that they don't really see their place in the world anymore. And particularly over the last couple of years, it's got ridiculous where um, what actually was like a relatively fringe topic maybe 6 years ago is just accelerated now, where everything in the media, if you watch anything in the mainstream, there's a massive political agenda. And I think masculinity now is a choice. And to be interested in masculinity and what it means to be a man is a choice in this world. Like the world we live in a world of ease, relative ease and pleasure, despite everything that's going on. You can um, plug yourself into the matrix for video games and pornography, and be very docile as a man, and not test yourself physically and not test yourself mentally. It's very easy to do that. In fact, it's widely applauded if you know your whole life revolves around Star Wars and Marvel and whatever other bullshit they're kind of presenting to people. But I think in terms of, I think that ultimately is incredibly unfulfilling, and it's not helping people in any way, shape, or form reach their potential.
Yep.
So, because I rejected all that stuff for a long time, and then it was really, like I say, through becoming a father and through doing more inner work myself, that then I saw this the archetype of the king as being this kind of ideal thing to strive towards, because you kind of got popular culture figures to see, but that you almost you need that mythic element to it, because it needs to be something more than real for you to strive towards, because people are always flawed. Like, if people put Jordan Peterson up on a pedestal, as we've seen, Jordan Peterson's just a man, and he's got his own flaws and he's got his own problems that he's struggling with, and he's not perfect. And you put anyone up on a pedestal, so we're giving them our gold, and we're putting them there, and they're going to let us down. And it's ultimate. So I've kind of felt like I've written more stuff about the king archetype as this kind of idealized man that there's this king energy within all of us, within all men, and it's this well balanced, well put together man who is strong and has the ability to use violence and aggression, but it's tempered with compassion and empathy. So he's not soft and he's not overly strong. He's got this center. It's the well-balanced man and I think the king's got lots of the mythic king, the archetypical king has got strong imagery around it that I think most men can resonate with, because like, you've got your kingdom, you've got your inner kingdom within yourself, and you need to rule and preside over your own kingdom, but also the outer kingdom within which you live. So your family and your children, and you preside over that kingdom as well, either on your own or with your partner. And so they balance each other out in a really nice way. And so I think the king energy, if you can start to channel through that king energy, the symbol of the king gives us something higher to aim towards. And it keeps, but also with the recognition that the king has got his kingdom, but it's not like the tyrannical king, like the shadow aspect of it, where it's like, oh, this is mine. I've got this kind of dominance power over it. It's like it's a reciprocal. There's other men who are kings as well, and they preside over their kingdom, inner and outer. And then ultimately, the king is a conduit to the highest king, which is God. So the king is only a conduit, so he has to humble himself to the higher principle as well. So I just think there's a really rich mythic architecture that gives us a lot to kind of, for me anyway, gives me a lot to play with, and I find a lot of inspiration in it. I don't know about you, if you found it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think like in general, the archetypes themselves, like, there's like the ones that were popularized by that book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, right?
Yeah.
But it provides perspective and it provides a framework to understand your own internal understanding of the world, right? It provides a lens to dissect your experiences through, and it's very in relation to being a man. And so, when you feel unfulfilled and you can't understand why, and it's, because maybe you're lacking responsibility in your life or something like that, where you just can't pinpoint it, but like the archetypes, tell you that that's within you. You have this king architecture within you, and it is that responsibility that you're lacking, where,
Yeah.
as a man, and that is a source of your unfulfillment. So I think that the archetypes can lead us to a lot of insights about ourselves, and then also inform us about the um kind of the shadow aspects about our personalities, right? Because there's like this duality, or there's a balanced, the balanced version of these archetypes, and then there's the imbalance, and you can have
Yeah.
the polarity there. You can now use that to contrast it to your own behavior and your own
Yeah.
relationships, and kind of
Yeah.
gauge where you're at. So it also provides a very informative um background into maybe where you need to take corrective measures in your own personal growth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 100%. I think it's like it gives, like for me, when I started reading about archetypes, and even a little bit about the tarot as well, because I love symbolism. I think that's something that's always been massively interesting to me. I'm not massively familiar with the tarot, but I know you've got the different kings in the tarot, and the highest principle is the emperor within the tarot system. But like, I think like the archetypes give a a lens or a conceptual framework from which we can perceive ourselves, but from a different perspective. Because as soon as when you when you kind of learning about the king energy and the magician and the lover, etc. So when you learn about these different archetypes and these different energies that we can tap into as men, I think it allows you some space and some distance to be able to see yourself within it and um, where you're falling short. And uh, and also it's kind of daunting as well. You think like that if you think that you're the king, you've got the potential to be the king, and like it'd be like fuck, like do I want to accept that responsibility? Do I really want to be the king? Because we straight away think of these, wise, in the mythic sense, it's the wise, powerful, ordered. It's the king who brings order and stability to the kingdom. You're like, fuck, that's a big thing to take on. Like, could I take that on? And it's like, well, that's what it gives us something to strive towards that most highest honorable goal. And I think that's where it gives us a conceptual framework for us to be able to see ourselves in a completely different sense.
Yeah.
That maybe if you're dealing with your own stuff and you're kind of stuck within your own position, is my daughter.
All right.
if you if we're if you're just trying to muddle through without seeing all of that stuff, then I think it becomes a lot harder in that perspective. So yeah, I think they just give us like this distance as a yardstick to be able to see ourselves. This is Amelia.
Amelia, hi, how are you? I don't know if she can hear me.
She can't
I'll
hear me.
wave.
That's it.
That's
Right.
awesome, man.
So,
Maybe
I'm just
this is
gonna.
is this, do you think it's a good place here to wrap it up? We've been talking for a while. I mean, I could talk for hours, but I got to get going here as well pretty soon. I was going to wrap it up, but I don't know if you want to, if this is a
Yeah,
good
that's
spot.
probably that's probably a good spot. A little
Yeah,
unexpected. Well, that's been an hour. So that's been a great. I think we could just talk for hours, man. There's so much more stuff to cover.
yeah. So I was thinking as we were talking, like, um, yeah, we should have another conversation at some point. I mean, we could delve into all of these stuff. I mean, ayahuasca, the archetypes, masculinity, like it just seems like there's so much ground there that we could cover. So maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I think we just scratched the surface. Really, there's a hell of a lot to talk about, and yeah, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. So yeah, man, I'd love to. Anytime you want to have me back on there, just let me know. I'm more than happy
Yeah,
to. Fantastic. Well, man, if anyone wants to follow me on Reclaim Mind
Yeah,
on Twitter, so it's just at Reclaim Mind. Hopefully, I don't know if you can put that in the show notes or something, so people
absolutely.
can follow me there. And yeah, reach out if anyone's listening and they're interested to get in touch. Then just send me a DM. I'm always eager to hear from people around the world and getting conversations. The beauty of a tool like Twitter.
Yeah, it's a crazy networking tool, and just a remarkable provides a remarkable ability to connect with like-minded people. So
One
I'm glad.
hundred percent. Like we were saying earlier, I think if anything, the last 3 years have shown us like building your network, talking to like-minded people, learning, growing as much as possible, and also not being stuck in um, echo chambers as well. Um, it's great to be able to test your thinking and stretch it in lots of different ways.
Yep.
So no, but like, thank you so much for the opportunity to come on and talk to you today. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to doing it again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, sounds good, Jay. All right, man. You have a great day,
All
okay?
right. Thanks very much. All right. You take care.
Peace.
Cheers, brother.